Hi class, welcome back. Now we are going to have another new lesson for today, and that is Chapter 2, Unpacking the Self, Lesson 2, To Buy or Not to Buy, that is the question. So in our previous lesson, that's Chapter 2, Lesson 1, it's about understanding the self in the sexual aspect. So in understanding the self, we are going to know further about the material self. Now, let's go to the next page. Now, let's identify first the lesson objectives for this lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to, first, explain the association of self and possessions. Second, identify the role of consumer culture to self and identity, and appraise oneself based on the description of material self. Now let's go to the next page. Alright, so now let's define material self. But before that, let's first recognize William James, okay, and his contribution to the concept of material self. William James, which is a famous psychologist, especially in behaviorism, states that understanding the self can be examined through its different components. So, according to William James, for you to further understand yourself, there are three components of the self. First, its constituents. Second, self-feelings. And third, self-seeking and self-preservation. Okay, so before we go to define constituents, let's define first self-feelings and self-seeking and self-preservation. So self-feelings pertain to the feelings and emotions that we feel about ourselves. Okay, so this pertains to like feeling happy and contented to oneself, feeling sad about the things that one experiences. So those are the self-feelings. These are the feelings that we felt for ourselves. Again, these are the feelings and emotions. Next, let's go to the self-seeking and self-preservation. So in here, it pertains to the actions to which they prompt. That is self-seeking and self-preservation. So meaning, these are the actions that we do to maintain such feelings or emotions to ourselves. So it's either we look for things that will make us happy, or we look at events that will make us comfortable and feeling satisfied and contented of ourselves. Not only that, we tend to maintain those things just to have just to maintain those feelings. So that is self-seeking and self-preservation. So according to William James, for one to understand what is the self, there is the self-feelings. Again, these are the emotions and feelings that we felt of ourselves, and self-seeking and self-preservation, which is the actions that we do just to maintain those kinds of feelings. Now let's go to constituents. To further explain on that, let's go to the next page. The constituents of self are composed of the material self, the social self, the spiritual self, and the pure ego. So when we say the constituents, this pertains to the things that we want, or the material self, the ourself in the society, our spiritual self, which pertains to the organizations or religions that we are enjoined to, and also our just pure ego, which focuses on our realistic aspect, or those are things that we are that focuses on the realistic side of ourselves. Okay, so let's go and define the material self. The material self, according to William James, is primarily about our bodies, clothes, immediate family, and home. So in here, according to William James, the material self pertains to the bodies that we have right now, the clothes that we wear, our family members, and our home. So when one says that the material self, or if one says, what is the material self in our, what is our material self? That means this is our height, our weight, our skin color, our hair, the way we look like. Are we tall? Are we short? Are we thin, or are we fat? Okay, or do you have a medium size? Are you petite? Okay, so that pertains to our bodies. Okay, so material self entails to our bodies as well, so how we look up for ourselves in our physical aspect. Next, we have our clothes. The clothes that we wear, the clothes that we choose, and the clothes that we avoid as well. So other people's define themselves through the clothes that we wear. So for example, the clothes that you wear is a bench, her bench, pen shop. Okay, I'm really not familiar with all the clothes, or all the brands of clothes. H&M, what else? Alright, so I'm not familiar with all of it. So some people define themselves depending on the clothes that they wear. So the clothes that they wear, and also the things that they have, just to accessorize themselves. So other people's do have Gucci or Versace. I'm not sure. So sometimes they feel so confident about themselves and feel satisfied about themselves whenever they wear specific brands. So that is also part of the material self, and also the immediate family that we have. So other peoples do have both parents in their homes. They have a single mom or a single dad, or they live with their grandparents, or they move from places to places. Okay, so it depends on the availability of the family members that they have. So as you can see, material self also pertains to the people around the family. So other peoples define themselves depending on the family that they have. For example, if that person grew up in a complete family, the material self in there is the complete family, while other people who grew up in a separate family tends to look for ways to complete their families. That also is part of the material self. Lastly, their homes. Sometimes there are people who lives in big houses, and sometimes there are people, or some people live in small houses. So the home that one lives in also identifies or parts of the material self. So as you can see here, the material self pertains to not only the material things that we have, it also pertains to our bodies, to the clothes we wear, to the immediate family members that we have, and also to the home where we stay in. So that is the material self according to William James. So again, according to William James, the self could be identified or divided into three: the constituents, the self feelings, the self-seeking, and self-preservation. Now let's go to the next page. Alright, the more investment of self given to the particular thing, the more we identify ourselves to it. So let's first identify or define or clearly understand the first sentence. So in here it says the self given to the particular thing. So we again understand the concept of material self. Now, sometimes, because some people are very invested on very invested in putting a lot of things or a lot of aspect in the material self. So once a person is very preoccupied to the idea of investing too much on their material self, we have the concept self-given. So self-given meaning that we are very particular on investing too much in the material self, and the tendency is that since we are invested too much on it, the more we identify ourselves to the material self. So people who are self-given or who identify themselves with the material self tendency, I'm sorry, people who are very much invested in the material self tends to identify themselves as part of the material self, or others are or others who are very invested in it actually define themselves as the material self. So like for example, a rich person who grew up in a very elite family, who has a very complete who's very for others, who has a very attractive body, luxurious clothes, complete family, and also a very beautiful house, would have a tendency to identify themselves that as part of it, or as the material self, yes, as part of them of that, and that is they identify themselves as the material self. My apologies. I think my recording stopped there a while ago. So, like what I've mentioned, like what I said a while ago, is that some people tend to identify themselves on the aspect of the material self. Alright, so in here it states again, the more we identify ourselves to it, meaning to the material self. So as long as you invest more on the material self, you tend to identify yourselves more to it. We also tend to collect and possess properties. The collections in different degree of investment of self becomes part of the self. So like what I've said a while ago, the more invested we are. Okay, now let's continue. We are what we have. So now let's define, or let's explain further the aspect of material self according to Russell Belk. Russell Belk posits that we regard our possessions as part of ourselves. We are what we have and what we possess. Actually, in other people, in our society today, that's what other people think. Okay, so like for example, if someone owns a MacBook Pro, that person will think of himself or herself as something that is very luxurious. So other people will see that person as well as, oh, that person owns a MacBook Pro, and MacBook Pro is one of the most expensive Apple gadgets in the market right now. So that person would be seen as something like very luxurious, or has a very other people would say that my gadget. All right. So so in here, Russell Belk says that we regard our possessions as part of ourselves. So if you have if you have a collection of Apple products, so you tend to identify yourselves as one of the people who owns a lot of Apple products, and how they live will be your lifestyle as well. So we regard ourselves, our possessions are now uh, identify us. Okay. All right. So what other aspects? Like for example, if you live in a very big house, so even though that you can't maintain it anymore, your identity is part of it already. Okay, because for other people, your identity is already part of it, because you live in a big house and others are not, so they will look at you as something that is rich, and they are poor, that you are something that's on top of the pyramid and they are not. Okay, so that's what Russell Belk is trying to say. Okay, further, as we grow older, putting importance to material possession decreases. So that's one of the good thing in possessions. I mean, in owning something. Okay, so other people. Okay, so when you were young. Okay, so let's go first when you were young. When you were young, especially just like me, I tend to collect stuff that I think would make me look good of myself. Like for example, I am very into dresses, floral dresses. Okay, so when I was in college, I really liked to wear dresses. But when I graduated and started working, I shifted my clothes into something that is more simpler. That's because I realized that being simple makes me more comfortable. Okay, so in here, um, what I'm trying to say is that when you started to grow older, the things, your possessions or the things that you own will the degree of its importance will become lower. Okay, that's why other people keeps on saying, money can't buy happiness. So sometimes you have a lot of money, but it's for other people it must be important, but for you, since you already have a lot of money, its importance decreases because you realize that having a complete family, a very good people around you is more important. So our the importance of materials tends to decrease in time. So that's what Belk is trying to say. Material possession gains higher value in our lifetime if we use material possessions to find happiness. Associate these things with significant events, accomplishments, and people in our lives. However, like what I've said, as you grow older, right? As you grow older, your the import the putting importance on material stuff decreases. However, in some people who puts their identity to material stuffs or material stuff tends to uh, tends to give it a more priority compared to others. So for others, like what I've said in here, if you possess a lot of things and your importance of putting a lot of your value, I mean your values on putting a lot of investments on owning things, your material self, you will I mean yes, you will find happiness. You will aim to find happiness on owning it. Okay, all right. So these are those who are people who puts their happiness on material things. Yes, it is possible. So that doesn't mean that they will not find happiness on that. But there are people who put happiness on owning a lot of things. So these are peoples who put importance on significant events, like for example, celebrating their birthdays on a very prestigious places, okay, or celebrating their events, their birthdays, uh, uh, in a party position, not luxurious enough or anything. Um, these are people who put much investments on that. And also there's people who collect accomplishments like awards, like yes, honors, and many more are also part of this. uh, I'm not saying that this is bad, okay? I'm just saying that there are people like that, and they try to put so much. They are trying to find happiness on material stuff, but I'm not saying that they will not find it. But again, we have different perspectives and perceptions, so they find happiness on that aspect, and someone will find happiness on other aspects as well. Okay, and I hope, of course, that everyone will find their happiness on those specific aspects. All right. So the possessions that we generally have tell something about who we are, our self-concept, our past, and even our future. So in here, the things that we have tells other people what we've been through, what we think of ourselves, and what we think of our future. So let me give you an example. Just like me, okay? So I have a plenty of gadgets. Okay, so whenever I started to go to school, I have to make sure they have a new laptop. Okay, because when I was a child, Okay, so I grew up in a public school, high school. So, and also when I entered college, when I started my first year in Trinity University of Asia, I did not own anything. I owned a cell phone. That's a very old cell phone. So that's, I think, Nokia back then. And then that's the only thing that I have. So our family doesn't own any computers. So imagine finishing college without having don't have any internet or computer at home. Okay, so I have to go to the computer shop just to study, research on things, and then also I have to go back and forth to the school library just to search on something. So if I've struggled and I've already experienced having nothing when I was still in college. And now when I entered in graduate school in USD, I've decided to buy a laptop. So, and not only then, I have also bought a laptop when I was still studying for my board exam, for my psychometrician board exam. So as you can imagine, I've already have two laptops, though both laptops are now very slow because it's already old. So I've bought laptops every time I pursue studying because I've already experienced having nothing when I was still in college. Okay, and I made sure, for example, when I started to work, I made sure that I invest or I save much money just to buy the laptop that I want. So that's it. So in here, owning a laptop, in my example, owning a laptop says a lot about myself. So in my past, I've owned a laptop because my past tells me that I don't want to experience the same thing that I've experienced when I was in college. My concept about myself about that is that I made sure that whenever I started something, I have to be ready. And if that in terms of in gadgets like owning a laptop, and my future will tells me that since you already have a laptop, you're now going to be comfortable in studying. So just like that. So my possessions tells me about who I am. Okay, so that tells me about my past, my present, and also my future. All right. So that's actually the final presentation. I mean, the final slide for this presentation. So I hope that you've learned a lot from this presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know in our chat, FB chat messenger, FB messenger chat. So thank you very much for listening, and I see you again. I hope to see you again in my next video. Thank you. Bye for now.